Good morning and welcome to this Pearson event this morning. I'm Tim Guilford, as Claire said, and we're here this morning to look at International GCE Advanced Level and the conduct of the speaking tests. So that's Units 1 and 3. As Claire mentioned, there are some resources which are downloadable from the Zoom screen in the Resources tab, or from the hyperlink in the chat. And it's useful if you can download those now as far as possible, please, so that we know that you have them, because a little bit later on, we're going to get you to listen to some recordings of speaking tests. And so it's useful if you have them now rather than later. So I'm just going to give you a moment or two just to make sure that at least you've found that link, or you've found those things in the resources and started the download. So I'll pause for a moment, and we may just have one or two more people joining us. I'll just give you a moment to do that so that you have everything ready for the session today. Okay, so hopefully everybody has started to find those things. Now, we're going to make a start really and think about, first of all, what it is we're here to do this morning. So in terms of our aims and objectives, we're looking at making the necessary arrangements for the speaking tests, how to run the two different tests, how each of the tests is marked. Although I have to say that the session today is not about marking, it's actually about conduct of the test, because of course you as teacher examiners don't mark the tests. The tests are marked by examiners, but we will talk a little bit about the mark schemes, because of course as you conduct the test you are aiming to facilitate your candidates' access to the marks. So it's important to know how they're marked, but the focus is not primarily on marking this morning. And then we're going to have a look at some simple activities as well to help develop some of the students' skills that enable them to deal with different parts of the test, and in particular to target different assessment objectives within these tests. So again, that idea of targeting both the conduct of the test and developing the students' skills to make sure that they have the skills required to get the marks in different places in the test. So we will do a little bit of that as well as we go through. So I'm going to begin now just to start to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you need to be thinking about in advance of the tests. And there is an element of planning which falls onto teachers and exams officers in school. So I want to just begin really by talking you through those things. So first of all, we need to make sure that you have the right kind of accommodation for the tests. So you need to begin by thinking about the rooms, and it's necessary then to book a quiet, secure room to conduct the test in. And it's also, I would suggest, a good idea to make sure that you've spoken to site staff and so on, to make sure that there's no machinery, there's no work going on nearby. Noise outside the room can be a problem. It can be a distraction to the candidate. It can be a distraction to you as the teacher examiner. But more importantly, sometimes when that noise is excessive, it means that the person marking the exam can't hear clearly what the candidate is saying. And so that element of it is really important, because as examiners, we can only mark what we hear. And so we need to just make sure that that's clear. Timetables, you need to put together a timetable and share it with your students. Do, as teacher examiners, and particularly if you're in a centre with a lot of candidates, allow some breaks for yourself. And, remember too, that corridors can be noisy between lessons. So think about your scheduling and your timetable within that as well. Don't make it too tight for yourself. You need to think about recording equipment as well. So the tests need to be recorded. you need to ensure that you have a digital recorder that records in a format that learner work assessment or learner work transfer, I think it's now called. I see LWA and LWT appear a little bit interchangeably through this presentation, but the Pearson platform. So what we're looking for ideally is a recorder that produces an MP3 format. And again, remember that examiners will mark online, so they will download these tests from Pearson Learner Work Transfer. So even though you're able to upload a test in a different format, you can create a problem if it's not in a good format for the examiner to hear. So do just check your digital recording device, and ideally, if we can get one that produces MP3, that's the best. And I'd also say have a backup device and some spare batteries as well, just in case. And you do also need a stop clock. Usually science departments and so on can lend you those things. There's a lot to do in these exams as you conduct them, and trying to, speak French, Spanish, and German, and examine a candidate, and do maths in your head to work out times is probably too much. So I would say just make sure as well you get a stop clock so that you can get the timing of each part of the test correct. In terms of materials from Pearson, you need to collect all the necessary documentation from the exams officer, and also use that to plan the route through the test for each student. And then again, check that the exams officer has received the documentation at least 3 days before the exam window. Those things need to be available to you in school. And then also uploading afterwards, there's guidance on the website about how learner work transfer works, but all the tests need to be labeled with the correct file name and uploaded in good time straight away. And I would also recommend that in your centre you save a copy of the recordings securely on your centre's own server if you can, or on a memory stick saved in the exams office, not relying just on the copy of the recording that's on the recording device, because those ideally should be deleted to maintain the security of the test. We never know who's going to use that recording device later. But it is important that you save a copy of the recordings, because if anything goes wrong with the transfer, you then have that solid copy of the evidence of what happened in that test, and you have that sort of backup. So just to talk to you now about the time window for when are the tests conducted. So the tests are conducted on a date chosen by the centre. You as a centre choose that date, and you need to make sure that you know when those dates are, when that window is. You can find further information on the website for the qualification that you're teaching, and your exams officer can also find it. But just to be clear, the test window for 2025 is the 9th of April 2025 through to the 14th of May 2025, and that's inclusive. So that includes the 9th. You could start on the 9th, and you could also do exams on the 14th as well. Obviously, if you're doing them on the 14th, it's cutting it a little bit fine, but you absolutely can. So that's the test window during which the tests must be conducted. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the different elements of each of the tests. So we're looking here at the overview of Unit 1, the Unit 1 test. So candidates have some preparation time, and candidates need to prepare the card for discussion, and they can make some notes. So they have 15 minutes to prepare that task. And then there are two sections in the test. So section A requires students to respond to 4 Pearson set questions on a stimulus related to one of the candidate's chosen general topic areas. So that's 4 minutes. So about a minute per question. And section B requires the teacher examiner to engage the student in a discussion that, although still relating to the same general topic areas, and its linked general topic area and its linked topics, moves away from the main focus of the stimulus. So just to be clear, the section A is those 4 questions set by Pearson, and the candidate should answer each of those questions in about a minute each in an ideal scenario. And section B requires you as the teacher examiner to move away to a linked topic area, so something that moves the topic on for 4 to 6 minutes. Now, those timings are also very important. You'll notice that we have, a maximum of 10 minutes of test time. And it's important to remember that at the end of the maximum test time of 10 minutes, examiners will stop listening. And also in terms of the candidates' access to the mark scheme, the more closely we can stick to those times, the better. So in terms of preparing your candidates, make sure that they have a sense of what about a minute feels like for those questions in section A, and that you are keeping a close eye on the time in section B. And then if we have a look at the Unit 3 test now, so the Unit 3 is the A2 test. This is again in 2 sections, so there is a presentation and debate, and that requires students to demonstrate the effectiveness of their target language skills by presenting and taking a clear stance on any issue of their choice for about a minute. And then students will interact with the teacher examiner as they defend and justify their views for up to 4 minutes. Okay, so just looking at the timing of that task, ideally we have a minute's presentation. Now it's optional whether they do a presentation or whether they just state their stance, but I would encourage you to encourage your students to produce this 1 minute presentation, but not a minute and a quarter, not a minute and a half, just under a minute, so that they've got that and they could have that clearly memorized, and that's absolutely fine. And then there is a debate element. So the debate part is also important, as we shall hear when we listen to some samples later on. There needs to be an opportunity for students to defend and justify their views. So you need to be gently challenging their views. Okay, so that's very important, because that's what they get the marks for, is demonstrating their ability to defend and justify their stance. Now, you don't need to be a harsh interviewer, but you need to give them the opportunity to defend that. So it's all those questions like, lots of people think, why isn't that true? Lots of people would say, or how do you justify what you said about whatever it is? Okay, so that debate element needs to be there. And in section B is a discussion. So the teacher examiner then initiates a spontaneous discussion on at least 2 further issues, moving the conversation away from the student's chosen issue. Okay, so that's 6 to 8 minutes. So let's be clear, recap again. Section A is that presentation, so they have a minute to set out their stance, the things they think about their chosen topic, and then they have 4 minutes of debate questions with you, and then 6 to 8 minutes about at least 2 further issues. Okay, so at least 2, and so we need to move away from the student's chosen issue, and again 6 to 8 minutes, so 3 to 4 minutes probably on each issue would be good practice. So please note, students will be expected to use debating skills and argument to discuss their chosen issue. They will be assessed on their reading and research skills in their chosen issue, as well as their communication skills and quality of spoken language. We will look at that in a moment or two as well. So let's just sort of think about what happens on the day of the exam. So on the day, what happens before the test begins? So just note that each student is tested separately in a one-to-one session with their teacher. The exam room needs to have the correct notices displayed and be free from any display that could aid a student. So if it's a classroom, make sure it's either the display is covered or it's removed. Students mustn't have any access to dictionaries, phones, or other aids during the test. And that's as much as you need to be making sure is good to go. So on the day of the test, during the test, then the teacher starts the recording device and announces the name, center number of the candidate, name of the candidate, and then you move directly onto the conduct of the test. And each candidate must be recorded separately. So please don't use pause. You need to record the whole of each candidate's test, and then you stop the recording, and then you start a new recording file for the next candidate. Again, this is most important because each candidate's work needs to be kept separate in the same way that when they do a written exam in the hall, each candidate writes on a separate exam book. We're not sharing anything, we're not putting anything together. So do make sure that that happens. And also the mention really about not using pause is important. The whole test needs to be recorded. So that's the candidate identification, the tasks, and the wrap up at the end. And you say, thank you. And it's good practice that you say at the end, that is the end of the test. Either in the language that you're teaching or in English, that's fine, because that indicates to the person who's marking it that the assessed part of the test is complete. The recording device also must not be paused during the test. And again, this is most important. And even if for some reason the candidate becomes distressed and you need to kind of make a decision about stopping the questions or anything like that, and then you need to I don't know, help them feel a bit more confident before you start again. Make a professional decision about that. And I would say report that to your exams officer. So if anything went wrong during the test, but don't pause the recording device. Keep that there because that way, if we need to apply any kind of special consideration at Pearson, we've got the evidence, you see, of what happened and how you dealt with it. And so we can be as fair as possible with that candidate. And of course, the whole test needs to be recorded in the target language. Now, at the end of each part of the test as well, you need to make sure that you introduce what's going to happen next, and you do that in the target language. So you say, oh, now in French, Spanish, or German, now we're going to move on to section B. In section B, you need to. And there isn't a fixed set of formulae for expressing those transitions between one part of the test and another, but I would just make sure that your candidates are clear. So from any practices and mock exams and things that you've done, they know what it is you're saying and what's going to happen next, so that they're familiar with that. And that gives them a little bit of a sense of security as well as they move through the test. And then at the end of the test, the teacher examiner, as I mentioned, should announce end of test and stop the recording device. So moving on now, just really to talk about if any of your students has a special need. What do you do? What adaptations do we make? So one of the things we say at Pearson is that our approach really is to aim to minimize any barriers faced by students with special needs or disabilities. So please speak to your exams officer and ask them to contact Pearson for guidance if you think that applies to one of your students specifically for this speaking test. Because a student who maybe has extra time for writing in a written exam may or may not need additional time in parts of this test. Perhaps in the Unit 1 test where they're preparing a card and maybe they do need to have that extra preparation time. But for example, in Unit 3, if there isn't anything that they need to produce in written format, well, then maybe they don't. So it is specific to the test rather than general. And try and do that as early as possible in the course so that any kind of special arrangements are clear to the students and, so that they can practice using extra time effectively, etc. So, examples, well, a student with dyslexia may be able to have some extra time to prepare the cards, okay? And a student with some verbal processing difficulty may have extra time to speak. So again, we need to sort of make sure that that we have removed that barrier. Um, I personally have had students with cerebral palsy, for example, who speak very slowly, and so they were allowed some extra time because their verbal processing was below the speeds that someone without that disability could manage. And so, again, about removing the barrier. And then sometimes a partially sighted student, for example, might have access to a spoken text or a reader or that kind of thing. So think about the special needs in terms of removing barriers. It's not about giving any sort of extra marks or anything like any kind of additional credit. We still need the same performance, but we need to remove any barriers that the student may face as far as we possibly can. So let's just pick up now on the things that I was saying about language transitions and also about sort of recovery. So because the test is conducted entirely in the target language, as I mentioned, do please use a consistent and familiar set of phrases, transition from one part of the test to the next. You can devise those phrases yourself, but just make sure the students understand them. So, good morning, good afternoon. We begin with the picture-based task. Now we're going to move on to thank you. That is the end of the test. And of course, all of that in the language that you are teaching, that you're assessing in. Now, if you make a mistake and you need to self-correct as well, do be careful to do that in a way that the students can understand. Because you will have a level of fluency and ability in the language that the students don't necessarily have. So again, just make sure that if you have to say, sorry, let me repeat that, that again, you're using familiar phrases, familiar wording to them. You maybe slow down a little bit because they need to understand. If you make a mistake, maybe by mistaking reading one of the questions or something like that. Everybody makes mistakes. That's absolutely fine. But if you need to self-correct, just do it in a way that makes it very clear to the student what's happening. And sometimes we've had, teachers who kind of make slightly flippant remarks or have made jokes and that kind of thing. And ideally, these things are best avoided because it's an exam situation. It's a stressful situation for students. So we keep it all kind of professional and sensible and serious as far as we possibly can. And also just make sure that your students know the exact words in the target language for the topic areas, because that list of topic areas is important, because, as you say, now we're going to move on to talk about. You can direct them gently to where we're going next with the test, but you need to make sure that they know the exact words in the target language for those topic areas. And also just make sure that your students have recovery skills to ask you to repeat a question, which you can do up to twice, even those printed questions on the Unit 1 cards. A student can say, can you repeat it? And you can repeat it. And then, sorry, can you repeat it again? And you can repeat it a second time. So actually they could hear the question 3 times. And make sure that they know that they can do that, that they can have that opportunity to clarify a question if appropriate. You can't change the question if it's a required question. You can't change it, but you could repeat it for them. So what I want to sort of pick out of the things that we're going to sort of talk about really during this training, and the things that I kind of, the key message. The key message is one of facilitative examining. So, and this is kind of quite a nice phrase. Facilitative examining means that you, as the teacher examiner, are trying to facilitate the students' access to the marks. That means by conducting the test exactly as it needs to be conducted, and thinking about what it is the students are getting marks for, and making sure that they are given the opportunity to get those marks, because that keeps the test valid, you see. Obviously, if we at Pearson give you guidance about how to conduct the test, and thank you for being with us today. But obviously, we can only fairly mark what we actually hear against the published criteria. So sometimes it's quite sad, really, that we hear tests where clearly the student has ability, but the test is not conducted in the correct way. And because of that, we can only mark what we have evidence for. And that's about being fair to candidates everywhere. So just a few things then about facilitative examining. Keep the language you use to ask questions as simple and accessible as possible. And where the option exists, follow native language structure, because the complexity needs to come from the student's answer. When I say follow native language structure, there are different ways to express yourself clearly in different languages. Some of those grammatical structures are kind of quite close to whatever the student's native language might be, and some are further away. So again, we're wanting the students to understand your questions. So keep your questions simple, and as far as you can possibly do, following the structure of the language of your student as you know it, because the complexity needs to come in their answer. So we don't need complexity in your questions, we need complexity in their answer. So you see, if we look at the example there, do you agree that inadequate infrastructure is a challenge for rail freight? And you see the complexity of that question. We've got unusual vocabulary. We've got sometimes perhaps a slightly awkward sort of grammatical structures to deal with. As compared with, do you think industry needs better trains? And in that example, we've got a simple, accessible question which will elicit probably the same information from the student. Okay, so think in terms of the simplicity. Nice, simple questions. The complexity and performance comes in what they give you back, rather than anything that's a complex question. So keep it simple, particularly if you're a native speaker of the language yourself. because that simplicity in the questions is important to make sure the candidate understands immediately the question. And a few sort of tips really about this kind of idea of facilitative examining. Try to do things like varying your interrogatives and linguistic structures. So as you're asking questions, we might what, why, when, how, where, who. We could ask questions with different interrogatives that will elicit different kinds of language from students. What and who, where, maybe when would tend to elicit factual information, but how and why would elicit understanding of context and of deeper issues. So varying the interrogatives is helpful, and also trying to vary the time frames, past, present, and future, that you use in your questioning, which then gives the students that opportunity to show that they can use different linguistic structures, that they can move across time frames in the way that they speak. So, you know, lots of present tense questions that begin with what is not facilitative examining. What we're looking for is that variation of question types and interrogatives, and questions that push students to answer in different ways using different time frames. And then the next thing really that I want to say about facilitative examining is that as far as possible, we need to think about open questions. So you begin with an open question. Very often it's going to be a tell me about question, a question which is an invitation, not a command. You need to listen carefully to the candidate's answer, and then you maybe are going to ask them some deeper questions that pick up on what they've said. So you might ask them for some details, what, who, when. You might ask them for some ideas, why or how far. And then you might also ask them for some evaluation. So what's the important, why is that important? What are the implications of that for such and such a thing? So again, that idea of facilitative examining, open question, listen, and then probe, follow up, go deeper. And also, as you're asking indeed your open question and also any of your other detailed ideas or evaluative type questions, try not to make any assumptions. Try not to bring your own knowledge to this exam, because very often teacher examiners will know lots more about the topic than the students do. Well, we hope that teachers do. But we need to not catch students out. So by using these open questions, tell me about, explain a little bit why, what do you know about such and such a thing? We give the students the opportunity to tell us what they do know, rather than catching them out on a specific question that they might not know the answer to. And as you hear their answer to their open question and you're doing your listening, if they mention something and they sort of hint that they might know a little bit more about it, then that's when you could ask them the more detailed question. But again, even, you know, when was that, or who did that, or you know, why was that important? That's probably as far as you need to go with it. So you don't need to bring your own knowledge to the test, and it's almost important that you don't, because again, it's distracting for students if they're asked questions that they just don't know the answer to. They don't. It isn't a test of their language. It's a test of their knowledge. But if they don't have the knowledge, of course, they can't show off their ability to speak the language. So this brings me to the next bit, which is about, therefore, not rigidly preparing your questions in advance. The next question needs to be based on what the candidate said, and that's important. And I'll tell you a little bit also why it's important, because, for example, the mark scheme for AO1 for Unit 1 talks about there being a wealth of relevant ideas and opinions demonstrating excellent knowledge and understanding of the general topic area. So that's what we're trying to get students to show us that they can do, that they have this wealth of relevant ideas and opinions, that they've got knowledge and that they've got understanding. So, for example, those details questions would tend to be about knowledge, but questions about ideas and evaluation tend to be about understanding. You ask them an open question. If they give you lots of facts, you then need to ask for the ideas and the evaluation. Okay. So we're looking for knowledge and we're looking for understanding, as those little arrows point you in that direction. Now, just talking to you a little bit about the topic areas then. In terms of the topic areas, the IAS how it uses those international AS topic areas: youth matters, lifestyle, health and fitness, environment and travel, and education and employment. All of your examining needs to operate within those areas. Certainly the cards will be set within those topic areas, and any questioning, anything you do, any follow-up that you do needs to stay within those topic areas. And then when we move on to the international A-level, the international A-level covers everything that we have from the AS, so Youth Matters, Lifestyle, Environment, Education, and also then technology in the target language speaking world, society in the target language speaking world, and ethics in the target language speaking world. Now, be careful here that you understand that the international AS topics do not necessarily have to relate to the French, Spanish, or German speaking world, but anything that comes from those technology, society, or ethics must reference, and any examples that the students use must be about the French, Spanish, or German speaking world. Okay, so if they're going to talk about technology and they're going to talk about the use of social media, for example, that isn't social media globally. That is, if we're talking about France, that's how much Macron uses X as a means to communicate with the population or that kind of thing. So those examples need to be rooted for technology, society, and ethics. They need to be rooted in the French, Spanish, and German speaking world, and not just anywhere. And that's very important in terms of the marks that are given for that international A-level if those candidates are going to talk about those areas. Right, so let's have a look now in depth and detail at each of the units, and we're going to sort of take you through some of the kind of key information that you need to know. So just first of all, we're going to mention the oral topic form. That's the OR1 form, and this form is uploaded. It's an electronic form, but it needs to be uploaded. It's not returned to centres. So just make sure that you are aware of that form and that that form is completed. We need to know candidate identification. We need to have the general topic area chosen by the candidate. And each of those general topic areas for discussion. We need to know the stimulus card that is used as well. Okay, so just make sure that that is there. It's electronic form, or indeed, I think scanned and uploaded, however you want to do it. Okay. Now, in terms of the allocation of the tasks, so how are the tasks allocated for Unit 1? Um, so if the candidate 4 chose, youth matters, education and employment, um, then they're going to have that card, which is EE2A. They're going to have card 2A from that topic area. Okay, so you need to look at row 4 and find the correct candidate card. And again, this is very important in making sure that you have all of this sorted out and planned in advance so that the candidate has the correct card, the correct information that they need, and that you have conducted the test correctly. So if we just sort of have a think about conducting the test, we've got an example in Spanish. We'll have a look in a moment at the detail of it, and we can kind of look at it from the sort of English side. But the mark scheme asks for AO2, there are 4 marks. So we're wanting full and detailed answers to prescribed questions demonstrating excellent understanding of the stimulus text and its wider implications. So look, as they answer the questions, they are getting marks for showing that they've understood the text. Okay, and so the text is there that candidates study in the preparation time. This is the teacher examiner card that you will have. And those are the 4 questions that you need to ask as a teacher examiner. Okay, so be very clear, okay, that you need to ask those questions as they are printed, and as candidates answer, they need to focus on the text and show full and detailed understanding of it. Okay, and we'll have a look in a moment at the actual questions. So for section A, they are answering those questions. Remember, we want about a minute per answer to each of those questions. And then for section B, we're going to move on to something related to environment and travel, but moving away, this topic was solar energy, moving away from that specific topic. Okay. So if we just think about the time management for this test, we've got kind of 2 sections and 3 things that we need to do. So in section A, you've got to ask those 4 set questions, 4 minutes approximately, but try and keep it to the 4 minutes and try and train your candidates to stick to that 4 minutes. And then we follow up a little bit. We've got some further questions on the topic of the card, and then we're moving on to another subtopic. Okay, so in that example, we've got the 4 questions which related to the topic of the environment, and then we're going to, so the topic of solar power, and then we're going to have a look at a little bit more widely at the environment, and then for the final 4 minutes, we move on to another subtopic. Okay, so that part of the test is going to be about energy, pollution and recycling. And then another subtopic, we move on to travel, transport and tourism there, okay, in the example that we saw. So if we have a look at it in English now, so we've got our example. So this was the text you saw, but I've just translated it into English. So in Spain, the policy regarding solar energy has changed a lot over the years. The previous socialist government built too many solar plants, causing surplus energy supply. In addition, their construction entailed an enormous cost for a country in financial crisis. However, experts do say that solar power will be able to meet the demands of the next decade. A solution has been developed to store it at night in order to have electricity when there's no light. The price of installation has also fallen by an average of 10% per year. Now, you have those 4 questions. So what does the first paragraph tell us about solar energy in Spain? So candidates are expected to show that they've understood the text. Okay, so as they answer the first question, we're looking for at least 3 main points from paragraph 1. Okay, so candidates are going to say in paragraph 1, it talks about the way that the policy has changed with regard to solar power. It talks about the previous government's action, and what they did was to build a lot of solar plants that meant that there was probably too much electricity generated, and that would give you 3 points. And perhaps if they want to add a final point, of course, this was difficult because Spain was undergoing financial difficulties at the time. So we're looking to find at least 3 main points for full marks there from paragraph 1, and there will be several points. So in terms of training your students, what are the points being made? And they need to summarize them. Okay. And then question 2, according to the text, what's the current situation with this energy source? So we're looking for the main idea of paragraph 2. Okay, so this is not specific points, but the main idea, and that is there. Okay, so what's the current situation? And then we're looking for wider opinions about the topic. In your opinion, can renewable energies meet all future demand? Why or why not? And in your opinion, what are the advantages of using renewable energies? Now, again, we're looking for opinions and justification there. And although the text is all about Spain, or it would be about France or Germany, depending which subject you're teaching, candidates are not in those questions 3 or 4 required to add extra information specific to the target language country, whether they're doing AS or A level. Okay, it's good if they can. It's good if they do have further things to say about this, and that sometimes is what teachers will have taught them, but we don't specifically need them to locate their examples in the French, Spanish, or German-speaking world for the Unit 1 test. So, just thinking about what a candidate could say. So what does the first paragraph tell us about solar energy in Spain? In the first paragraph, we learn that there have been lots of changes of policy in Spain with the approach to solar power. There was overproduction as a result of the approach of earlier governments, and too many power plants were built, especially given the economic problems Spain was facing. So we've neatly paraphrased those things, showing full understanding of the text, but not reading from the text. You can use some words from the text, but not read from the text. According to experts, what's the current situation with this energy source? Experts think that there will be enough solar power capacity for the next 10 years. This means have also been devised to store power for use overnight when there's no sunlight. And they also point out that the costs of installation have decreased by 1/10 each year. So we see those 2 questions, and you can show those examples to your students. This is how we go about answering those questions. And that's probably about enough for the minute that you need to answer those questions. You can be nice and concise. So then if we sort of move on, we're moving on now to the opinion questions. In your opinion, can renewable energies meet all future demand? Why or why not? I don't think they can meet all demand. All demands can be. I don't think they can meet all demands, but can expand massively. As the text mentions, they can be costly to install, and there's an issue with the continuity of supply. For example, more power is needed in colder and darker winter months. I also see a problem with the technology in certain sectors, such as aviation. So what have we done there? You've answered the question. You've referenced the text again. You've picked something out of the text, but you've developed it and expanded on it by adding in some new ideas. In your opinion, what are the advantages of using renewable energies? I think the most important advantage of renewables is environmental, because they tend to be cleaner. The text also says that costs are falling, so this is an important advantage for customers and is also good for industry, as energy prices affect the cost of goods. And again, noticing that we've in those two answers as well, we've referenced the text but added ideas to it. Okay, and then we have a look at section B. So section B, where do we go to next? Okay, so the overall topic is environment and travel. We've could then move on to tourism, travel, and transport. Okay, so the topic that we had on the card was about energy. Okay, so we need to develop that discussion a little bit around that energy pollution and recycling in part B. So we can cross out energy. We don't want to know any more about energy, but we could talk a bit about pollution and recycling. So we could have about 2 minutes of that. Do you think recycling is important? Okay, so we move slightly away from there, but not massively away. And then for the final 4 minutes, we're going to go somewhere else within the sub-theme. Okay, so now let's move on to talk about travel and transport. Do you think public transport's important? And you give that open starter question. Okay, so this is where you need to be adept at making sure that you plan the test. Okay, so 4 minutes for the questions on the card. And then we have 2 minutes that sort of take us to some other aspects of the sub-theme. Okay, so, you know, if the sub-theme on the card is energy, pollution, and recycling, energy is what's on the card. We then move on to talk about pollution and recycling. If the card is about tourism, we could then move on to talk about travel and transport. If the card is about natural disasters, we move on to talk about weather. If the card is about climate change, we then might move on to talk about the wider aspect of climate change. So we move slightly away from the information on the card, and then we move into another sub-theme entirely. Okay, so this one started with energy, so we start with 4 questions about energy, then 2 minutes about pollution and recycling, and then 4 minutes about tourism, travel and transport, ideally. Okay, so section B is your move on. And if we have a look at what the marks are given for, then the marks are given for quality of language accuracy. So that's AO3. There are 5 marks for that. Quality of language range of lexis. This is the range of vocabulary. So there are 5 marks given for that. Spontaneity and development. And I've sort of exemplified in those answers about the card and also in my comments about facilitative examining, about you listening and you basing the things that the questions that you ask on what the candidate has said to you, and you know, pushing them to do that. So spontaneity and development gets 16 marks. That's a lot. Then understanding, so stimulus specific. So in that AO2, we're looking to make sure that in all of their answers to those 4 questions, we've got something that references the card. The first 2 questions, really almost ask the candidate to summarize in their own words the things that are on the card. But even in those second two, those questions 3 and 4, it's good practice if the candidates give us something that references the, as the card says, as it makes clear in the text, so that we are showing full understanding. And then we're looking for knowledge and understanding of the general topic areas. So that's the AO1 as well. Okay. So that knowledge and understanding, facts, and also connections to the wider issues. That knowledge and understanding for Unit 1 does not necessarily need to be located in the French, Spanish, or German speaking world. It can be kind of global. That's absolutely fine. But again, we're looking for not just knowledge, not just what do you know, but also understanding why does it matter. Okay. Now that's good. What we're going to do now is we're going to give you a little break from listening to me, and we're going to get you to listen to a Unit 1 speaking test for the language that you're teaching, and you should have found those in the materials that you download. And if there's any kind of problem, there Claire will be able to jump on the chat and help you with that. Okay, so in your delegate download pack, then I'm going to ask you to select the Unit 1 test to listen to for the language you're teaching. Now, remember here, we're just focused on the conduct of the test, not the marks awarded. But we have included some commentaries in the delegate material so that, you know, if you want to sort of see what the principal examiner said, that's absolutely fine. As you listen, then just please take note of the way in which the test is conducted and just sort of connecting that back as far as we can to the information so far in the presentation. So were the 4 questions from the card asked? So do you hear those definite 4 questions being asked? Was the topic on the card developed a little bit further? Did the examiner move on to a different subtopic? And were the questions facilitating and open in nature? Now, the test lasts about 10 minutes. So it's at 9:59 now. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back on, I'll go quiet now. We're going to come back on at 10 past 10, and then we'll continue the presentation, and we can do similar for the Unit 3 a little later on. So we're going to give you 10 minutes now to have a listen to a Unit 1 test. Okay, so I'm going to go quiet now, and I'll have a look at the chat in case there are any questions and see if I can pick up on those as we go through. Okay, so I'll see you see you back in 10 minutes. Okay, great. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to listen to most of that Unit 1. People obviously will have the recordings and the downloads, so you can listen to those in greater detail or again if you want to. And for those of you who know one of the other languages, sometimes it's worth having a listen to the French if you're even if you're a Spanish teacher. Okay, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about the kind of adding value bit really, the way that we can sort of develop some of the skills in the students. So one of the things we do need our students to do is to be using their own words, because as they talk about the text on the card, particularly in answer to questions 1 and 2, they need to really paraphrase it effectively. They need to summarize. So again, useful to be doing some work around using their own words. So, commonly used words like problem can be changed to challenge. We might look at the antonym, the solution, and also sometimes about different parts of speech. So for some of those words that are used lots and lots and lots, problem, trend, all of that kind of thing, change, uh, can we find a synonym? Do we know the antonym? And also, can we use a different part of speech? And also other ways to say the same thing. So if we've got the word government in the text, which again is something that could commonly occur, can we say politicians or world leaders or the people in charge or ministers? If we've got fashion mentioned in the text, do we know how to say what people wear, popular brands, dressing to impress? If we've got volunteering mentioned in the text, do we know how to say charity work or helping those less fortunate or making donations? So synonymous words or phrases for common things that the students may need to talk about. And also this idea of same sense, different words, and you can give students practice with this. Education is very important for our society because skilled workers allow the economy to grow, and this enables the country to compete effectively abroad. Good schools are essential because well-educated workers help the country make more money, and this means we can sell our goods and services internationally. So again, giving your students that opportunity, sometimes from a short written text like that, to say the same thing in different words. And that's all about building that skill that is required to answer particularly those questions 1 and 2 from the card, as we saw earlier on in the presentation. Adding value in section B then, well, we saw how many marks there were for spontaneity and interaction. So, candidates can be leading the discussion with a teacher examiner who's listening. And so, if you are listening carefully and the candidate says, but this isn't the only issue, and then you can say, okay, so what else? So they lead the discussion in that way. There are lots of examples I can think of, says the candidate, and you say, oh, tell me more. So again, listening carefully and training your students to feed you those responses that they would like you to have, that facilitates interaction. And also anything you can do in section B that's about framing your thinking, positive, negative, interesting. This is the good side of something. This is the negative side. What I found personally interesting was, so plus minus interesting. And that's a de Bono idea. Also thinking about developing students' ability to use subordinate clauses to extend analysis. So although something there is, however, not everyone agrees that because, okay, so some of these kind of formulations which would enable them to show that they can analyze. So although we've shown some information and then we've shown some further knowledge, not everyone agrees with this idea and why. So we've done opinion and justification. And Also, with this, one thing that's quite a nice thing to do is to look at the words in the mark scheme and sort of try to weave them in. You know, the mark scheme says a wealth of relevant ideas and opinions demonstrating excellent knowledge and understanding of the general topic area. So pick out some of those words like relevant and ideas. You know, this is relevant because, and opinions, my personal opinion is that knowledge and understanding as I understand it. Okay, so we can use some of those words from the mark schemes to make sure that we are targeting the mark scheme. Relevant ideas, as soon as the candidate says this is relevant, this is important, this is significant, because what they've done is they've had to produce a relevant idea. So by using that language, we can train the students to chase and target the mark schemes. Okay, now, oops, let's go back. We're going to move on now. We're going to have a look at Unit 3 and the Unit 3 speaking test. I'll give you some opportunity to pick up on any questions at the end, but we'll kind of go through and make sure that we've done the presentation. And I think quite often when you hear the presentation and then you hear the example at the end, the questions are kind of clarified anyway. So please apologies to people who put questions in the chat. I see they're there and I'm not ignoring you, but I will pick them up at the end if they appear to be still unresolved, if that's okay. So the Unit 3 speaking test then. So let's just have a look at the overview of the Unit 3 speaking test. They need to develop their presentation skills in the target language by presenting and defending their own views on their chosen issue whilst sustaining a debate. Students can choose any issue and they're not restricted to any of the prescribed general topic areas in the other units. So it can be absolutely anything. Students need to develop their debating skills by defending their views and sustaining their discussions. The grammar list provided in Appendix 6 illustrates the level required for this qualification. The assessment is 11 to 13 minutes long, and the assessment is out of 40 marks, and it's marked holistically, though some marks are allocated specifically to the debate. Now, let's just so I'm just going to pop back to this as well. And just one thing to add about the fact that students can choose whatever issue they'd like to choose. Keep in mind that they need to research their issue, but they also need to research the language. So sometimes it is a good idea if they pick an issue that sits within either the general topic areas or the specific technology, ethics, etc., context for IAL, because they're more naturally likely to have the language to deal with it if it's been something that's part of the taught course. Okay, but part of what they need to get ready is not just the content, it's not just the knowledge, it's also the language. Now, we'll have just a think about the OR3 form. So students need to complete an oral chosen issue form. This is an OR3 form, and that's found in Appendix 7, oral assessment forms. And that needs to be done no more than 3 weeks in advance of the assessment. On that, they need to write a brief statement in the target language indicating their stance on a chosen issue. And not just the topic, okay, so not just problems of the environment, it's their stance. I think that, in my view, okay, in my view, solar power is the only useful, sustainable energy source that the world has, and we need to have that stance, or I am against something, okay, so the idea of a stance is important. A copy of this form needs to be submitted to you, the teacher examiner, before the assessment. Students can take a copy of it into the exam and they can refer to it at any point during the assessment. The electronically completed oral chosen issue form must be sent with the recording to Pearson. Okay, and if you just want to have a look, it's a form that again looks like that. They download it, they type into it, it's electronic, and again, it says it's not returned to the center. So if you've uploaded and you want to keep a copy, you keep a copy, but it's not something that you will kind of see again if you upload it and don't keep a copy. So let's just have a look at the overview of the test itself then. So section A, students choose a topic on which they take a stance. Okay, and that stance idea is important. They need to have an opinion about an aspect of the topic, not just talk about the topic generally. They have free choice of the topic and they're expected to research it. They need to refer to where they found information in target language sources. This is important. So they need to talk about where they got the information from. And those need to be in target language sources. So it's not sufficient to have read an article in The Guardian and then applied it to France, Spain, or Germany. You need to have read that article in a publication originally published in the target language, and you need to refer to that in the presentation and discussion. And students may choose to spend approximately 1 minute to outline their stance on their chosen issue, followed by approximately 4 minutes of debate on the issue. And at least 2 sources must be mentioned to access the higher marks. And it's quite often a good idea for them to mention their sources and talk about that in the presentation. So in the presentation element, they say, I'm going to talk about the issue of something. My stance is that I believe that, and whatever it is that they've chosen to talk about. And in order to find out more about this issue, I've looked at this website, I have read this book, I have looked at this newspaper, but at least 2 sources must be mentioned. And it's a good idea to say, I've looked at this website where I found out about, and it said, and I've read this newspaper article that did something and told me something else. They might also want to comment on their response to those sources. I found it convincing because it came from a government website, and so I think it's valid information. This newspaper, I wasn't so convinced because I know some of what it said might be politically motivated, etc. So they do need to refer to their sources, and it's probably a good idea that they might do that in the presentation element. So in section B then, the teacher examiner introduces at least 2 further issues for discussion. Students must not know in advance of the assessment which further issues the teacher examiner will choose for discussion. These must be unpredictable elements of the assessment. And remember that they're getting those marks for spontaneity. So if what they say sounds rehearsed and unspontaneous, then you are not doing them a favor at all if they have a hint of where those where that test might go for section B. So it needs to be unpredictable. And where the issues relate to the IAL topics, that's technology, society, ethics, in that section B, students must refer to the countries or communities where the language is spoken. And really for the higher marks there, it's not enough just to say in Spain, in France, in Germany, and then go on to talk about something which is a kind of a global issue. They should have examples from there as well. And quite often those topics generate almost the most effective section Bs, really. And students have 6 to 8 minutes discussion time. So it's sort of 3 to 4 minutes about, you know, the 2 further issues. Okay, so again, if you're going to talk about, say, let's talk about technology now. What impact do you think social media has on young people in Germany? And we could do that. Okay, and now we're going to talk about ethics in Spain, for example. Euthanasia has been as you know, has been legalized. And can you tell me a little bit about the controversy that might be around that, etc.? Okay, and so 6 to 8 minutes. And again, that needs to be discussion, not, 3 to 4 minutes of monologue on those two topics. So students can get prepared with things to say, but you must engage them in a discussion because marks are given for interaction. So let's have a look at the debate then. So teacher examiners should prepare by thinking of possible counter arguments to the candidate's chosen stance. They should ask the candidate to outline their stance on their chosen issue. They need to stop candidates if they speak for more than 1 minute about the issue at the beginning. They need to make some notes as the candidate speaks in order to formulate the questions. Remember that this is a thing that candidates have researched. You won't necessarily know what it is they've researched, so you're listening. You need to challenge the candidate's stance using counter arguments for about 4 minutes. Now, the point is as well, you mustn't try to win the debate. It's not about that. It's about that offering that sort of facilitative challenge to the candidate's stance. So you're not trying to beat them, but you say, but surely lots of people think, or surely, older people have a problem with, and we can kind of do that. And you're gently challenging their stance. Okay. But once they've defended themselves and said what they think and they've justified that, you don't need to pursue it in any particular direction. And you might be asking them for, but can you give me some evidence of that? So it's not necessarily always a counter argument. It might be asking them to justify something that they've said. You need to also make sure that you are asking the candidates about their sources of information. So what did you find in your, have you seen this in your research? And in particular, if they haven't spoken too much about their sources in their presentation, but again, in those questions, what does the evidence of your research point to? What data did you find in your research that indicate that what you're saying is correct, and so on and so forth. But you don't, as I say, need to bring your own knowledge to this debate or indeed be an expert on the topic in question. So sort of fair challenges in the debate, then let's just sort of have a look. So a fair challenge, something the candidates said already. You mentioned X, but it seems to me that it would be better if, or, using a generally held and familiar counter argument. What you say is interesting, but don't most people think that? Okay. And just keep in mind that an unfair challenge could be where a teacher examiner introduces detailed superior knowledge. So, but surely you know that the events of 1868 do not support your stance, so maybe they don't, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but you need to just avoid bringing your own knowledge to it. And also anything that's likely to be outside the experience of the learner. So they're not expected to be experts on geology or economics or whatever in order to, sustain this this challenge to their stance. Then in section B, we need to move on to further issues. So 2 further issues must be discussed. These can come from the IAS or the IA2 topic areas. As I mentioned, if they're from the IA2 areas, they must be rooted in the target language, culture, or communities. Each issue should ideally be discussed for about 4 minutes. This part of the test is not a debate, and so candidates can just be asked to show what they know. Okay, so remember, the debate is at the beginning. You're challenging them specifically in section A, but in section B, we don't need to keep that up. They will have shown that ability to defend a stance in section A, so we don't need to have any further debate as such. We're just asking them those facilitating questions. Candidates need to, so you also need to refer to the earlier slides about facilitative examining with regard to that. And then begin each issue as well with open questions. You know, tell me about the importance of technology in the French, Spanish, German speaking world, and then listen and dig deeper. So that's a kind of key message really about those open questions, listening, and then you start to challenge. We don't, or to dig deeper. We don't dive in with difficult questions right from the word go. And you need to avoid overlap with the content of the debate. So we don't want to be asking them to use the same kind of language again. We don't need to ask them to talk about the same issues. It should move away. And so in terms of the management of the test, it's this 1-4-8 pattern. We have a 2-4-4-4, I think, pattern. Sorry, a 4-2-4 pattern for Unit 1. This is a 1-4-8 pattern for Unit 3. So in Section A, the student sets out their stance, if they choose to do so, for about a minute. And then you debate their stance for about 4 minutes. And then we deal with 2 further issues, about 4 minutes per issue, and that gives us 8 minutes approximately. Okay. So, you know, their stance might be, I think young people should be able to vote at the age of 15. And then you move that on to 2 different things. So you might talk about tourism, travel and transport, and the problem of poverty in rural Spain, France, Germany. Okay, so we can do a tourism one, which wouldn't necessarily require them to talk about France, Spain, or Germany, but we might also want to have an IAL one, which is an ethics type thing. And so we would have one of those, and you can choose those yourself in Section B. But the idea really there is just that when we get into Section B, we've moved well away from anything that they talked about in Section A. So they're not going to use the same language. They're not going to use necessarily the same structures. And we're also not going to hear the content duplicated. And so if we just have a look now at what marks are given for in this Unit 3, again, we've got quality of language in terms of accuracy and quality of language in terms of range. So 5 marks each for accuracy and for range of lexis, range of vocabulary. You know, look, 20 marks again for that spontaneity and development. So, you know, is there proper challenge in the debate and so on? Are we seeing those things happening? Are the candidates leading? Are they developing their ideas? 5 marks go for reading and research, and this is the debate part only. So this is where I say it's really important that they talk about the sources that they've read. And so you are asking them some questions about the sources, or they are volunteering that in their presentation part as well. And then there are 5 marks there for critical analysis, and we'll have a look at those things in a little bit. Now, we're going to move on now. We're going to listen to a Unit 3 test. So again, the same thing that you did earlier on in your delegate download pack. You should find a Unit 3 test. We're going to get you to listen to it. So first of all, you know, was there a debate? How did the debate work? You should see an example of good practice there. Were 2 further issues dealt with? Did the examiner move on and observe the timings? Pretty much you see how the transitions worked during the test. And also, were the questions facilitating and open in nature? So we keep coming back to this facilitating nature of the test. Now it's 10:35 now, so I'm going to come back. We're going to come back at 10:45. So we'll give you 10 minutes to have a listen to that and find it, and I will see you back, or you'll hear me back at 10:45. Okay, thanks very much. Right, okay, thank you. I hope you've had the opportunity then to listen to that recording of the Unit 3 test for the language that you're teaching. And obviously, if you haven't quite had the time, you do have the recording that you can use at a later date. Okay, we're going to do a little bit the same we did with the Unit 1. Obviously, we're dealing with A2, we're doing with International A level for this Unit 3 test. So for the Unit 3 test, we're stepping up the level of the demand, we're stepping up the level of the ideas. So just in terms of thinking about how you might add some value, well, we're thinking about this debate. So again, maybe working with students with the de Bono's thinking hats, so what are the facts? So what feelings do these facts, generate? So do you have that kind of intuition, judgment, prejudices? What might be there? You might ask them to express sort of creative ideas, concepts, perceptions. We might ask them, say, lots of people are pessimistic about this. What do you think? Or lots of people are see benefits. Do you agree? Do you think this is positive? We might ask them to do some analysis and again some judgment. So again, a little bit of we've got. I think a lot of people used de Bono's thinking hats a long time ago, and then you sort of forget about it. But it is quite a nice little sort of thing to work on in terms of training your students for the debate. And then in terms of adding value in section B, the further issues. So we need to, as I mentioned, think about the topic area. We need to talk about two topic areas, lifestyle, health and fitness. Let's say we choose that. So we give an open question. Tell me what you think makes for a healthy lifestyle. So it's a nice open question. Then remembering what we said about using those different time frames and that range of interrogatives. So we start then to explore that issue. Why do some people not look after their health? When do you think health problems start? How can people become healthier? Where do you think people have the best diet? Who's responsible for the well-being of the elderly? What advice would you give to the government about health? And if you look at those questions as well, you see that in asking those questions, we've moved across some time frames. When do health problems start? So we're going back into the past there. And we're then also maybe moving into future time frame. What advice would you give to the government about health? So we're moving into a future time frame with conditional. So I think just that kind of idea of how we add value in section B is important. Whoops, let's just go back. Okay, so we've talked lots and lots about the test. You've had that opportunity to listen to a couple of tests. I'm going to just move on to nobody loves administration if you're a teacher, I don't think, but we're going to just have a little bit of a mention really of the administrative elements that you need to be aware of. So we need to have that candidate authentication form, and that needs to be signed, and the candidates give their permission. And that can be scanned and uploaded into the oral assessments through the learner work transfer. So just be aware of that. If you are looking for administrative support, remember that in the website, we've got a specific area that will give you that administrative support. So that's in the forms and administration area. And you can see the administrative support guides, assessment support forms, and so on. Everything is there for you to grab and to use. The submission arrangements for recordings, we now need to ask you to upload everything to the website, which is that learner work transfer. It says new arrangements, but they were new in June 2022. So people have probably done this before, but again, just have a look and make sure that you're aware of how learner work transfer works, or that your exams officer is. I mean, this is quite often a job that exams officers will do. And then I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about support, really, that's available from Pearson with regard to the conduct and running of the tests, and indeed, anything else that we kind of maybe could help you with. So there are lots of support materials available. You will find these via the web page for the language that you're teaching. So we've got resources which are about planning, teaching and learning. So all of those different guides, skills mapping, sample assessment materials, examiner reports. Look carefully at the examiner reports. Do make sure that every year you read those and that you act upon the guidance that's given. We've got exam preparation and assessment support as well. So in addition to those things that we've just talked about, past papers, remember Exam Wizard. Exam Wizard is a free resource that enables you to pull together questions that come from different topic areas to make an assessment. So make sure that you're familiar with that, particularly if you're new to Pearson. There are mark schemes, and also we give results plus mock exam analysis, so you're able to feed your mock exam results in and have a look how you're doing against the sort of whole cohort picture. And then there's some results support as well. So in addition to all of those things we've talked about, Results Plus will give you analysis of individual candidates' responses for your centre. So you'll be able to see, was it on a particular paper on question 3 where they all struggled? And that sort of enables you to target what you do with teaching going forward. And also there's access to scripts. Remember that you can get back the scripts there. I can see somebody said Exam Wizard wasn't available for international A-level. I think it is available now. I'm told it is, but we will have a look at that and do apologies if I'm mistaken, because I was told it was, but we will have a look, and if it isn't, I will feed it in, because I think that there should be no reason that we don't have it. But thank you for your comments on that. So it may be that this slide has been included in error, but we'll find out about it. Now, all the resources then on the web pages for each of the languages, just keep looking at that. And then things kind of come along, as well through time. So it would be useful, even if you've looked at it, a little while ago, just to keep having a look. And, the training that we're doing today is something new. We haven't offered this before. So again, if you have kind of particular requests for particular training, we can do that. I think we're planning to do something on teaching the literature and film type question, the sort of essay things later on in the autumn. So Results Plus we've talked about, and so you can have a look at those things with Results Plus. That would be good. And so what you're able to do is to get that analysis really of performance reports and see really how your centre is going. It's interesting, actually, just on this thing, just whilst we're looking at this particular slide, that photograph in picture 2, the student takes the exam papers, but exam papers are scanned and examiners mark papers online. So do make sure that your candidates are aware that these things are marked online. So we don't try not to put answers at the bottom of the page without an answer, an arrow that points down, or this kind of thing. Marking is done in kind of clips that appear on the page quite often. So just making sure that they do that is quite important. But that's a thing for another training for another day. And then these performance reports are generated and shared. Now, there's a question mark about Exam Wizard, so we'll find out about that, and we won't say any more about that, except to mention that the National A-Level, which is there, has some very similar content. So sometimes those things are also useful for, at least for teaching resources. We've talked about access to scripts, so you can grab the scripts. You can have a look at sort of how the marking works. You can get some better understanding really of how your candidates are performing. And so that is there and available to you. What else do we need to talk about? Pearson Publishing has some resource packs available. And again, you can use whatever resources you'd like to use, but those resource packs are available. And I'm just sort of going to mention now Rebecca Waker, who is our dedicated, in so many ways, subject advisor. So if you do have any kind of queries, and actually these, I will take the query about Exam Wizard to Rebecca, but she's your kind of first point of contact. So you can email teachinglanguages@pearson.com, and Rebecca or one of her team will respond to you. And if you want to phone, you can even phone and speak to someone on that line that should take you directly through to Rebecca or her team. And they can provide you with all sorts of queries, and in particular, if you have a sort of request for training or that sort of thing, anything further, as far as we possibly can, we can do that. I know we have more things planned for International A-Level, and I am really trying to encourage these things to happen. So I think we are planning to, if I'm correct, we are planning to do something for the kind of the literature film type essays, the extended writing part, but that will be something that kind of comes along in the autumn. But as I say, contact Rebecca if you're interested to know more about that, and also do keep an eye on the events that appear on the website. Now, that sort of brings me pretty much to the end of what I want to say and talk about with you this morning. I hope you've found it a useful session, and I'm just sort of having a look. I can see that there are one or two things in the chat, but I hope that most of what we've talked about, most of your answers seem to have been kind of dealt with in the things that we've said. So I have got the chat open now. If you have anything specific that's hanging over now, and I've missed it or it wasn't included, do just drop that question in, and if I can answer it, I'll answer it, and if not, we'll try and get an answer to you somehow. But I hope you found it a useful session this morning. We've covered an awful lot of ground in only 2 hours, so I hope it's been something that that helps you. Janet, you're asking about textbook plans. I will ask. I don't know. Is the answer to that? And of course, those things always depend a lot on the number of candidates that we have. So Adela is saying some of my students have chosen similar topics for the debate, but have different approaches. No, that there aren't any issues with them having similar topics, and quite often they do. They have similar interests, as long as it has a slightly different stance, and and I think the key thing is that it's individual to them. So the things they say about it are individual, and as you examine them, you are challenging their stance in a different way, because we do need to get that spontaneity going. So I hope that sort of helps. So Unit 1, would 3 minutes be okay on the card, and then adding missing time to section B? It's challenged to spend 1 minute on text-based questions. Ismail, that's a really good question. Try to stick to the times for each section. So if they only do 3 minutes on the card, don't add that time to section B, because the section B time, section B is marked separately, and so you're not doing any favors there. It just means that the answers are a little bit shorter in section A. There's a little bit of elasticity, but don't add, with those questions, don't add extra questions, don't add extra time into section B. Okay. And I think that's sort of what we need to do. So Adela says, as far as I understand, in Unit 3, we can ask questions belonging to Unit 1 as long as they mention some aspects of the target language countries. Yes, actually, in Unit 3, if one of your further topics is an AS topic, they don't have to talk about the target language countries in answer to that. But as soon as you get into that, technology and ethics and society questions, they must answer with regard to target language countries. So this is important for students to understand when they need to talk about target language countries and when they don't. And if I were conducting the test, if I asked them any questions about society, technology, or ethics, I would add, in Spain or in France or in Germany, what, or in the German-speaking world, and I would really push them. And if they start to speak generally, say, yes, but can you give me an example from the German-speaking or from the Spanish-speaking world, so that we push them to do that. In the Unit 3, where they talk about those AS topics, they can talk about anywhere in the world, and that's absolutely fine. But actually, it is also probably quite good if they talk about, France, Spain, or Germany. So is there a requirement to cover both topics from AS and A2? No, there's no specific requirement about that, Adela. I would say it's probably quite a good thing to do, because I think they have more sophisticated ideas, more sophisticated things to say about the A2 topics, because they are more sophisticated in terms of the content of the ideas. They're more philosophical, if you see what I mean. And so I think sometimes that's to do with how able you think your students are, but there isn't any specific requirement to do that. You just need to do 2. Okay, well, look, everybody, we're 2 minutes over time now, so I'm going to say a huge thank you for being with you, or for you for being with us today. Hope you found it useful. We will do further events for you. We'll run this one again as well. So if you want to join again, but in the meantime, you can go off and have your coffee or your break, or go back to teaching, whatever it is you need to do now. But I'll stay here a little while, so if there are any queries that pop up in the chat, I'll be on for another 5 minutes or so, hopefully answer those. So thank you very much. Gracias, merci, danke, and enjoy the rest of your day.